Welcome everyone to the Unit 1 overview video, briefly introducing chapters 1, 2, and 3, which will be covered within our first week of WSSD 605 Sport and the Law. The goal for all unit overview videos in this course is to provide you with a roadmap. My goal for each video is to keep it short, sweet, to the point, but also be informative, not just in terms of content within the chapters, but also with what you can expect assignment-wise for each week. So here on the screen, you'll see my agenda for this video. All unit overview videos will follow a similar, if not totally identical structure to the one listed up here on the screen, where I'll begin with first providing a broad introduction to the topics discussed in the unit, sharing information about how you can earn your engagement point, reminders about assignments and your plan for the week. And then in the final portion of the video, I'll get into explaining your chapter readings as far as diving into key concepts and terms discussed, as well as other assignments. For example, in this one, your applied activity number 1. So let's get into it. Unit 1 consists of chapters 1, 2, and 3. As you can imagine, because this is the first week of the course, these introductory chapters set the foundation. There are a lot of terms and terminology that are used to define and explain basic legal concepts, really explaining how the judicial branch operates in the US. Then in chapters 2 and 3, we begin to peel back the layers and actually start to look at specific legal concepts. Two of these topics, negligence and risk management, are probably some of the most important things that you will learn as a sport manager, because these are two concepts that are some of the most common lawsuits and also that really impact sport managers on a day-to-day basis. So my goal for you when reading these chapters is obviously completing your assignments, but also I strongly encourage you to think about how are these different areas going to appear in your professional or personal experiences? Maybe they already have through something that you've experienced directly or indirectly by speaking with a colleague or a friend. How do you anticipate they'll show up in your career in the future? Beginning to make those connections helps to personalize the material, but also see how applicable it will be for you in a professional sense. Jumping into how will you earn your engagement credit for Unit 1? I encourage you with every engagement assignment within each unit, to use it as a do now activity. So after I walk you through what I'm expecting for this particular engagement credit, pause the video, do it right now, cross it off of your list, and that way then you can begin to move through the different content areas that are more specific to what we are discussing in the discussion forums, quizzes, and activities or assignments. So there are two parts to earn your engagement point for Unit 1. Part 1, completing the student information sheet. You can find this in the Unit 1 module on D2L. Download the provided document, complete it, upload it. Note that if you're a new student, this means that you've never taken a class with me. You should be filling out the new student information form. If you are a returning student, it means that I've had you before as a student. Please fill out that form. The second activity is an introductory post. I want for us to post to the intro forum within Unit 1 with the below information, your name and pronouns, your progress in the graduate program, and then responding to the final question, how confident do you feel navigating policies or compliance requirements in sports settings? Just in a few sentences. This is so that we all have the opportunity just to introduce ourselves to each other before we really get into those discussion posts. As a reminder, these engagement activities are due Friday by 11:59 p.m. Please make sure that you're getting that done to earn your point. And here's your chance to pause the video and do this now. Here on the screen is our plan for the week. So you can see I've just discussed engagement number 1, due Friday, December 19th at 11:59. Also due on that Friday is your Unit 1 discussion initial post. Due on Sunday, we have 3 assignments, your Unit 1 chapter quizzes for chapters 1, 2, and 3, your 2 reply post in the discussion forum, as well as applied activity number 1. I'm going to hold on speaking about applied activity number 1 till the end of this video. What I would like to just briefly mention here, as far as your plan for the week and judging your time and how you want to tackle this work. First things first, look at the discussion prompt posted. So that way, then you have an idea of what the topic area is in relation to this unit. This will especially help clue you in when you're reading particular chapters into ideas for how you could respond to that post. The instructions and rubric for how I will grade you based on your engagement within the discussion and your two reply posts are posted under the Start Here module on D2L. The final point that I would like to make is in relation to your chapter quizzes. I strongly recommend that you take the quiz immediately when you finish reading the chapter. That way, then the information is fresh in your mind. Now, as you are reading each chapter, please do not act passively by just reading and assuming that you'll be able to answer all of the questions. Highlight, take notes, jot down important things for yourself to remember to take the quizzes. This will also help prepare you for the final exam, which in this course is only 4 or 5 weeks away. However, the information, because we move fast, does tend to blend together. So actively make sure that you are retaining that knowledge, practicing that knowledge by noting down things that stand out to you as you are reading. We're now going to pivot into discussing the chapters within Unit 1 and content that is important for you to know. All right, so let's jump in right now to chapter 1. Chapter 1 has a lot of information within it, but it really focuses on the types and sources of law in the United States and providing background knowledge so that you have an understanding of the function and process of federal and state court systems. All of this information allows you to have a better understanding when we start to learn about cases in future chapters or especially when we get into some more legal concepts so you can see where they are derived from. Now, chances are you've seen some type of infographic like this at some point in your schooling, maybe a history or a social studies class, etc. The focus of chapter 1 is beginning to provide how the American legal system operates. So we know that there are three branches of government in the United States. The US Constitution provides a separation of powers. The focus of chapter 1 will be the judicial branch right here. And the judicial branch is responsible for evaluating laws. You'll read more about the Supreme Court as well as other federal and state courts and how they operate and intersect with the sports setting. Here are some important concepts for you to know within chapter 1. The first being stare decisis. This is a Latin term that represents the foundation of our judicial system in the US. This will be discussed in the textbook when you read more about sources of US law, specifically when you see information about common law. And stare decisis is defined as a system of precedents that assist in deciding future cases. Our legal system in the US is based off of case precedent, and that's really what this concept is trying to communicate. The second key concept is the doctrine of supremacy. This will be discussed when another another source of US law, statutory law, is introduced. Statutes are laws enacted by state and federal legislatures. Common statutory laws that apply to sports are Title IX, the Americans with Disabilities Act, ADA, Volunteer Immunity Act, etc. The doctrine of supremacy indicates that federal law supersedes conflicting state law. This provides us with a hierarchy within our legal system. The final three bullet points allow us to see the quote unquote anatomy of a trial. Who are the individuals or the parties involved in lawsuits? What are they called? Some hints for this: plaintiff, defendant, jury, etc. What are the components of a trial? Does this include the complaint, the answer, the summons? Who dictates the presence of a jury? What's the role of a judge? And lastly, you'll read about primary and secondary legal resources. These are important for you to consider as sport managers. Both types of resources impact how you do your job. And now looking into chapter 2, this is where we really start to dig into specific legal topics after we have gotten into the foundation of our legal system in the US. Chapter 2 discusses a very important concept: negligence. I can't stress to you how important this particular concept is because it is the most common lawsuit affecting sport managers. So in chapter 2, you will learn what negligence is, describe its types as well as its four elements. You will also be able to identify and explain the defenses to negligence within sports scenarios. Very important for you as a sport manager to know how to proactively protect yourself from any type of allegation related to this. And then it'll also dive into intentional torts within sport. This is different than an unintentional tort, such as negligence. And the chapter will then wrap up with a discussion on product liability as well as its application within sports settings. Over the next few slides, my intention is to be able to provide you with just some background information about all of these areas involving tort law. For us to begin, I want to discuss just what legal duties are within athletic programs. So these are responsibilities that are owed to other people that are well established by case law, stare decisis. And I've listed 14 here that are commonly accepted within athletic programs on the screen. Feel free to pause, review, read through these as I discuss. Now, you'll see that the first legal duty is to plan. It's very important for everyone to have a plan, and we can consider this within pretty much any sport management position. Coaches, athletic trainers, athletic administrators, athletic directors, etc. And as you continue to read through what each legal duty is, know that there are more than what's listed on the screen, but these are our primary legal duties that really intersect within sport management positions in athletic programs. As a note, under the doctrine of respondeat superiority, which you will read about, these duties can also apply to managers too. So, what is negligence? Big focus for this chapter. Negligence is defined as an unintentional tort in which the alleged wrongdoer does not intend the consequences of their actions to another person, property, or reputation. Nevertheless, that other person was harmed. You'll read in your textbook about what each of these elements here mean on the screen: standard of care, breach of duty, proximate cause, and suffered damages. I recommend paying attention carefully to these in consideration of your applied activity as you'll analyze a case related to negligence in sport. So here, our first one, standard of care. This is most directly related to duties or duty of care, as it's also called within a legal setting. A duty is a special relationship between two or more parties that might be created by statute, contract, or common law. We can really think of standard of care as, is there a responsibility owed to someone? Then, when we get to breach of duty, the second element here, how would a reasonable person act within this situation? And was that particular responsibility owed to someone not upheld for some reason or another, is what the court is evaluating here. When we move to the third element, proximate cause, the court is evaluating the case information and asking, did the breach of duty actually and significantly contribute to the individual's injury? Which leads us to the final element, suffered damages. What was the injury? Was it physical, financial, emotional? And what type of damages did that person suffer? Some important points here that will be covered within the textbook. The first being the plaintiff has the burden of proving their case when negligence is alleged. The second is that the plaintiff must prove all four elements of negligence. If the plaintiff fails to prove all four elements, then the negligence case fails. As I alluded to earlier in this video, negligence is one of the most common lawsuits that impacts sport managers. One recent example that you might have heard of involving negligence is related to the death of Jordan McNair, a tragic situation that happened in May of 2018. Jordan was a football student athlete at the University of Maryland who unfortunately collapsed from heat stroke during a practice and died 2 weeks later. This story depicts the importance of upholding multiple duties within a standard of care. And unfortunately, this was not done in May 2018. So, this was an example of what we could classify as negligence. The other thing that you'll read about in the textbook is how to defend yourself from a negligence claim. And this is all about the assumption of risk doctrine. So this is really flipping the script as a sport manager. What can you do to defend yourself should you be alleged of negligence? There are three elements within the assumption of risk doctrine that must be met. The first, the risk is inherent to the sport. The second, the participant voluntarily consents to be exposed to the risk. And the third, the participant knows, understands, and appreciates inherent risks of the activity. This particular legal doctrine is considered a form of preventative legal theory. It's having sport managers consider what could you do prior to organizing or overseeing an activity to uphold this defense and hopefully prevent any negligence allegation in the first place. Let's look at an example of how the assumption of risk doctrine could be implemented within a particular setting. So let's take mountain biking as a sport. What are some risks naturally occurring within this activity? Think to yourself here, what is probably the worst case scenario of what could happen to the athlete in this photo? Some things here, a broken bone, a scraped leg or arm, a sprained joint. These are all things that would occur within mountain biking because of the mechanism of activity, riding a bicycle over rocks, inclines, and declines. This would be considered risks that are inherent to the sport. The second element, participant voluntarily consented to be exposed to the risk, right? Let's say that this athlete in the photo, they've probably voluntarily consented to be exposed to the risk by signing up for the race. So that's one way that we know that they were not forced, manipulated, coerced into participating in this activity. It was done of their own volition and desire. The final element, participant knows, understands, and appreciates the inherent risks of the activity. Well, how do we know if someone knows, understands, and appreciates the risks? One way is considering how do we warn people of the inherent dangers of a sport? The other way we can consider this is has a person competed in the sport previously? Based on this photo here, this athlete is representing USA at an international race. We can presume that they have a high skill level and experience level. They also probably have expressed that they knew, understood, and appreciated the risks through a waiver. So, this is one example of how the assumption of risk doctrine is applicable within sport settings, and you'll read more about this within your textbook. The final point that I want to make for chapter 2 is just discussing what intentional torts are. So, this is the opposite of negligence. This is when the alleged wrongdoer intentionally wanted to harm someone else. And you'll see listed up here on the screen the most common intentional torts, and the textbook will dive into examples of how these appear within sport settings. Our final chapter within the unit is chapter 3. And this chapter, if I can be biased and share, this is one of my favorite chapters in units to cover and discuss, is all related to risk management. So you'll see there are 5 learning objectives here listed on the screen that basically outline defining what a risk is, what are the types of risk present within athletic programs, how can we use risk management as a preventative legal theory, what are the steps within the risk management process, what is an EAP, an emergency action plan, why are they important for us to know about as sport managers, both legally and medically, and finally, explaining the areas of importance in facility management for individuals with disabilities. Now, this chapter will heavily cover the various steps within the risk management process. Risk management is the process of identifying, assessing, and taking action on foreseeable risks. It's a balancing act as well as a methodological approach that has to occur in order for sport managers to uphold their standard of care. This is necessary to ensure that there are safe instructional, playing, competitive environments. The entire goal of the risk management process is to protect organizational assets. Organizations use risk management processes to prevent loss of money, loss of time and effort, loss of reputation by damaging public image. In the textbook, you'll read about the components: recognition, analysis, and action. Now you'll see here in this image, I've expanded on what you'll read in the textbook by adding this element here, evaluation. The importance of risk management is that it's an ongoing process. The most effective way to ensure that we've managed risks is to analyze the effectiveness of the actions that we've taken here in this third step. So the best process for sport managers to follow after taking action is to then evaluate its effectiveness at the end. So let's look at a really quick example here. Listed on the screen is an outdoor high school field. The first step of the risk management process is recognition. So, to recognize risks, the athletic administrators of this high school need to acknowledge the safety risks that exist for players, for spectators, etc. They first need to acknowledge that risks exist and that they can negatively impact their organization. The second step is analysis. To analyze risks, the organization should identify risks and hazards, evaluate them according to probability of the hazard occurring and the potential severity of the hazards. And all this process is done as exercising foreseeability. So, one risk within this particular setting could be crowd control during a spectator event. The final step within the risk management process, according to the textbook, is action. So, to act on a risk or identified hazard, the sport manager would need to take on a variety of actions. Maybe avoiding the activity, maybe transferring responsibility back to the participant, or maybe it means treating the hazard by taking some type of action to reduce the risk based on situational factors. So let's take our risk that we previously identified in step two, which would be crowd control. One way to act on the risk of crowd control would be putting up appropriate signage, hiring extra administrators or security to cover the game, maybe even hiring police to help manage any type of crowd, especially in a rivalry situation. Now, as you can imagine, all of these things related to crowd control happen on a regular basis in any athletic setting, whether that ranges from amateur to collegiate to professional. And you can see here on the screen that this image was actually taken from a real life place in the US where a woman sued after a trampling incident at a South Carolina high school football game. And she accused the particular school district of negligence for a lack of crowd control. So this connects directly back to concepts discussed in chapter 2 with negligence and also chapter 3 as a key connection to risk management. Unfortunately, this example was one that allegedly was an unsuccessful example of risk management from a crowd or spectator perspective. And really, the point of sharing this with you is that high schools, colleges, professional sport teams, even just sport organizations should constantly be thinking about these steps of the risk management process to prevent, again, any loss of organizational assets, time, effort, money, public image, or reputation. To wrap up our video, I just want to share a little bit about the applied activity number 1. So after you complete the readings for Unit 1, you should then begin to work on your first activity. You will read a real life case, Pinson versus the state of Tennessee, which is a negligence case involving a student athlete at the University of Tennessee Martin. You'll need to reference the 4 elements of negligence as well as risk management concepts when completing this assignment, which is why I recommend reading, completing the chapter quizzes first so that you feel prepared. As far as time frame expected for you to complete this assignment, I would make sure that you set aside at least an hour and a half for you to complete as you are planning out your week. And that concludes our Unit 1 overview video. Please reach out to me with any questions.